Hello. Thank you so much for coming and welcome to our discussion of Nikita Stewart's book, Troop 6000, the Girl Scout troop that began in a shelter and inspired the world. And we are so lucky to have Nikita with us today. Um, you have joined a webinar of the Brattleboro Literary Festival. Please add any questions you have for Nikita as we go through this in the Q&A button you'll find at the bottom of the page. Nikita will maybe, if we're lucky, read a short passage, and she and I will talk for a little while, and we hope that some of your questions start populating in that area so that we can get to things that you're curious about. But this is an incredible book that is super heartening and very moving, and also sort of could be a practical guide for many people on how to do excellent community organizing and create programs that change people's lives. So it's both a rousing read, and I think it's got some ideas that some people might be able to make use of for their civic action. After the event, there's going to be a little page that pops up, and you're going to have an option to buy Nikita's book, or you can donate to the Brattleboro Literary Festival. We're an organization of volunteers, maybe 24 people that put this on every year, and some year I hope to get Nikita back in person, maybe for her next book, to try some of our organic farms and hang out here in person, but this is an excellent opportunity online this year. So I hope you can donate to keep our program going at the end. But let's jump right into the discussion of Nikita's book. Let me introduce her. First, do you want to say hi and tell us how you got us, how you heard about the Brattleboro Literary Festival, and give a quick hello?
Sure. My name is Nikita Stewart. I'm the author of Troop 6000. I can't thank you enough for having me. I was hoping that I would be in Vermont looking at the leaves, and I was very excited to come, but we're in a pandemic, and this is the safest way to do this. So I'm happy to be here. I had heard about Brattleboro, and I believe we initially reached out to you all, and they were like, yeah, we'd love to have you. So thank you once again. I thought that this would be like winding down my book tour. But what's interesting about being virtual is like the book tour just keeps happening. I think it'll just go on through the spring until I can actually show up in person somewhere.
I'm glad it's going well. Let me give folks a quick overview of the book, and if I say non-factual things, you can fact check me, or if there's something that you want to correct, because this is such an amazing book, and after reading it, my head is just full of ideas about how did this happen, and where are these people now, and so forth. Anyway, let me give a quick bio of Nikita Stewart. She is a reporter covering special services for the New York Times. She is the Newswoman's Club of New York recognized her in 2018 for her coverage of homelessness, mental health, and poverty. She's a finalist for the Livingston Award and the Investigative Reporters and Editors Award, and she joined the New York Times in 2014 after working for the Washington Post. And the book we're talking about here came out from Random House in May, the Girl Scout troop that began in a shelter and inspired the world, Troop 6000. It's about this innovative program started by a homeless woman with 6 children um, Giselle Burgess. And Giselle really wanted to, well, I'll let Nikita talk about it, but she wanted to, provide an opportunity for one of her daughters, especially Haley. And the book follows the mom and daughter through this very closely, in their feelings and their obstacles and triumphs throughout this process of starting a Girl Scout troop designated 6,000, because the Girl Scouts put numbers on their troops to designate the location. 6,000 isn't a location, it's sort of an etc., sort of an extra number that is for special troops. So there's obviously no location for a homeless person. So the group 6,000 started in a shelter that was New York City has a lot of hotels that are partly shelters. This is called the Sleep Inn. And so the Sleep Inn hosted this Girl Scout troop, and it grew and grew. And it is now 600 people, 16 shelters, an incredibly affirming human story that talks about resilience and the day-to-day struggles of folks. That is just a driving story from a talented writer. But it also, to me, had a lot of tips or like specific information for people who are involved in civic action or community engagement of any kind, where Giselle thinks on her feet. She's a very flexible thinker, and she thinks of ways to bring assets that the girls have to grow this organization. And that part of it is sort of practical and also very inspiring.
Yeah. Actually now the troop has, there have been 1,500 girls who are a part of Troop 6,000. And, that was at the end of the book, though. That was like, the book ends in 2018. And so we're now 2 more years. And so now it's in 20 shelters in New York City, and 1,500 girls and women. And it has inspired troops. There's actually, the troop named itself Troop 6,000 in honor of Troop 6,000 New York in Nashville. And there are other troops all over the country that have been inspired to reach out to girls who are experiencing homelessness. So it was beyond my imagination that this would happen. And I'm so glad you brought up how, I haven't heard anyone put it that way, that this could actually be kind of a tutorial or, how to for folks who are community organizing. But I have been saying over and over again that I really thought, when I decided that I was going to write this book, in my head, I was going to write a book about homelessness in New York City, but I was going to use the Girl Scouts as a vehicle to tell that story. But what I came away with after spending more than a year with them, this was really a story about community and how people come together even under the worst circumstances. These were families who were probably having what could be the lowest or one of the lowest moments of their lives. And yet they had this desire to be a part of something bigger and to help each other. And to watch that happen over a year was just amazing. And, the girls, some of them, most of them, I should say, the ones that were in the book are now, out of shelter and in housing. There are a couple of families that are lingering, unfortunately, in shelter. But, they all stay in touch, and everyone is still very much a part of the family. And I'm happy to say that, like, Haley is going for her gold award. If there are any Girl Scouts out there in this webinar, how special that is. And her gold award is in fact based around Troop 6000. So, you know, I'm very excited for her. And yeah, and you mentioned the name of the troop, which was the passage that I was going to read today. So, yeah.
Is there a passage that might be good to kind of give the texture of some of the great scenes that are in the book?
Let's see.
Not to
Well,
put you
you
on
know,
the
the thing
spot.
is, like, there's so much action at the end. I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm gonna give away the book if I read you. Like, I'm like, you gotta get to the end, because this is one of those things too where when I set out to write the book, I think maybe I should back up a little bit. This book started with an article that I wrote in the New York Times. And it even started before that. You know how, you know, the man meets the moment, that kind of thing. So, you know, unfortunately, my colleague recently passed away, but he sat next to me, Jim Dwyer. He's an incredible writer. Maybe some of you have read some of his books. So I started covering social services for the New York Times in late 2015. And I really wanted to understand homelessness. And, you know, when you're starting a new beat, you go anywhere, everywhere, someone invites you to something, you show up. And so a council member, Jimmy Van Bramer, a council member out of Queens, you know, he sent one of those emails saying, you know, he was going to be serving Thanksgiving inside a shelter. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can get inside a shelter, because any chance I could get inside, because it's so confidential, that, you just can't just walk in. So I was like, okay, here's my chance to, you know, I might not write a story, but I can see what it looks like and talk to people. So I showed up. It was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, 2015. And there were these Girl Scouts there serving Thanksgiving lunch. I was like, oh my gosh. Oh my, you know, I'm just sitting there. I'm so touched because they're so cute. They have their uniforms on. They're struggling with the styrofoam plates. And I'm just like getting a little teary eyed. But, you know, I'm trying to stay focused because I was there to meet some of the women who lived in the shelter. This was a shelter for single women. And it was, it had been created out of a hotel in Queens. So there was a controversy over that. So, you know, I have the afternoon, I take a few notes, and I'm just like, oh, wow, you know, that was cute. And I got to see what the Verve Hotel, which was also called Pam's Place, looked like. Never thought anything about it until fast forward to 2017 in the winter, and Jimmy Van Bramer's office reached out to Jim Dwyer asking if he was interested in writing a column. Jim was a columnist. He wrote a column called About New York. Would he be interested in writing a story about a Girl Scout troop that had formed in a shelter? And he's like, you know, but you know who you should get? You should call Nikita Stewart. And so that's what happened. He was like, she's covering homelessness. You should call her. And, you know, as soon as I, you know, listened to the situation, I was like, oh my goodness, I will be there. Like, when can I come to the next meeting? Or like, next meeting's Friday. I'm coming Friday. And so I went to that first Girl Scout meeting. I went to a few more and talked to parents, talked to the Girl Scouts. And I wrote the story. It landed on the front page on Easter weekend, 2017. It went viral. I mean, everyone in the world, I was getting so many emails, and it was crazy. And so then people were like, oh, are you going to write a book about them? And I'm like, well, I do want to know more myself. So I'm like, gosh, you can't just stop here. And so I approached Giselle Burgess, and said, hey, you know, I would be interested in writing a book. There's nothing in it for you. Like, you know, I'm like, there's no reason for you to agree to do this. But she was like, absolutely, you know, I want people to see my story. And at the time, the story was really about homelessness. And I didn't know whether or not the troop was going to survive or if it was going to fail right away. I had no idea what was going to happen. And, you know, there were people who talked to me who thought they knew what was going to happen, what the book was going to say. And I was like, no, you know what? Let me just follow it for a year and see what happens. And, you know, the old saying, you know, I don't want to say truth is stranger than fiction, but truth is certainly very exciting and definitely influences fiction in every way. But here was a true story of these ups and downs that I never saw coming. And that's why I don't want to read any passages from the end. Like the second half of the book, you always think it's over and it's not over. You know, I always thought something was the ending of the book. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, this is it. This is the end of the book. You know, I thought when they finally found a home, I'm like, that's the end of the book. It was not. And so, you know, I hope lots of people read it. If you'd like, I'll read the passage about 6,000. So it's a chapter called 6,000.
That sounds great.
Okay. So, you know, Giselle manages to get some girls to come to a meeting because it was very difficult in the beginning. Parents didn't have a lot of time to listen to what she was talking about. Plus, they were confused because they're in the shelter and they're like, what are you talking about? There's going to be a Girl Scout troop here. They're like, you know, and then she had to deal with staff, people who worked in the shelter and people who worked in the hotel who were suspicious and were like, you're not even supposed to be doing that. She's like, no, I have permission. And so she finally gets permission. She has kind of like a pre-meeting, and some girls actually showed up. Now, 3 of them were her daughters, but you know, if you know anything about Girl Scouts, you have 2 girls, that's a troop. And so here's where we're getting to like actual what it's going to be called. First, though, the troop needed a name. Giselle suggested 11101, the sleep-in zip code. Although clever and easy to remember, that name would conflict with long-held tradition. Girl Scout troops in the city were limited to 4 digits, and the numbers had always corresponded to the boroughs. In the Bronx, the troops were numbered in the 1000s. Brooklyn troops were 2000s. Manhattan troops were 3000s. Queens troops were 4000s. And Staten Island troops were 5000s. But this new troop was unique. It belonged to girls who did not know where they belonged. It wouldn't make sense to use the numbers normally applied to troops in any of the 5 boroughs, given that its members had no fixed addresses. Wasn't this troop of girls, no matter where it was located, really like a floating borough in its own right, or even a shadow borough, because the rest of society was ignorant or didn't want to acknowledge its residents? At some point, Girl Scout staff realized that the 6,000s, designated years earlier for specialized troops, like those girls, like for girls with special needs, were no longer used. And so the Girl Scouts of Greater New York settled on the name Troop 6,000. You realize this is big. This is going to be amazing, Meredith told Giselle. I should say Meredith was Giselle's boss and her friend. Giselle wanted to jump up and down, but as usual, worries dogged her. What if she couldn't recruit more girls? What if she couldn't recruit parent volunteers? What if she couldn't maintain the little bit of momentum she had already achieved? 3 days after the troop was officially named, Giselle hid her anxiety as she stood on a stage to accept a proclamation from Jimmy Van Bramer, who'd selected her to be honored at his annual Black History Month celebration. Giselle was proud of her heritage, which included her father's Black Southern roots. She was in esteemed country. The flyer for Jimmy's event included the faces of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Rosa Parks, Maya Angelou, W.E.B. Du Bois, Nelson Mandela, Bessie Coleman, and President Barack Obama. The celebration was held at Jacob A. Reese Neighborhood Settlement House, where a longtime nonprofit of the same name helped immigrants and youth. Giselle stood on the stage with her children and scouts from the Sunnyside and Woodside Troop. The proclamation made no mention of Giselle's homelessness or Troop 6000, but it was a reminder for Giselle that people were expecting her to be great. She had to make Troop 6000 bigger than 8 girls. Whereas Giselle Burgess has had a ripple effect. The girls she recruits and mentors go on to build a better world and community. Ms. Burgess is an incredible role model to not only her 5 children, but to children across Queens. And whereas Giselle Burgess has truly enriched all of us with her service, and she is worthy of the esteem of all New Yorkers now. Therefore, be it known that Jimmy Van Bramer, Majority Leader of the New York City Council, gratefully honors Giselle Burgess for her outstanding service and enduring contributions to the community. Expectations were now in writing.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, folks in the audience, please respond with any questions that might be itching, you might be itching to ask, or comments that you want to make. Put those down in the Q&A section and we'll get to those. I wanted to ask about the other side of Giselle. That's a great passage because it shows kind of her getting a lot of positive reinforcement, but she's in a vulnerable position that when you mentioned that you asked her whether you could write about her, in the book you go into, that's a difficult decision for her.
Yes, it is. And, Giselle and I have done some of these talks together. And it was in those talks that she finally admitted that she did not trust me initially. She's like, oh gosh, what am I getting myself into? Like, she said yes, but Giselle is a person who will, she doesn't anymore. And you'll see that evolution in the book. But she used to be very much a people pleaser. And so, I think she had this thing where, okay, I'm going to please her and I'm going to agree to do this book. And then she realized, oh my gosh. And she and other folks who are featured in the book, they joke with me that, I carry a notebook everywhere, obviously. And I was like, oh my gosh, what's she writing down? Shut up. Don't say that. What do we do? Don't do it. And then, it almost became like my notebook became like a camera, but then they got used to it. Like it was just like a part of my body. It was an appendage, if you will. So they got used to it. When you read the book, or if you have read the book, you know that camping trips are, kind of anchors of the book. And it was the first camping trip that Troop 6000 took, where Giselle said that she really began trusting me because, they were having this horrible time. And that was actually one of the critical points where it was like, oh my God, I was thinking, oh my God, there's not going to be a troop. Like, is this where the book ends? Okay, so I'm just going to follow her for the rest of the time. And then, I just thought, okay, there's not going to be a troop, or it's not going to be led by her. But, it all worked out in the end. But yeah, she said it was that trip when she began trusting me. But that was also the first time I had spent the night with everybody. So, when you actually spend 24 hours and not just, a 2-hour Girl Scout meeting with someone or a 4-hour field trip, you really get to know a person. So, we were together a good, 36 hours straight. So yeah, we got to know each other real well.
We've got some great questions from our audience. Aaron P. asks, Nikita, how do you manage your time working for the New York Times and writing a book?
Well, the good thing about Troop 6000 is that in reporting in that year, they met every Friday night. And so luckily I could manage my time correctly, where I would leave my job at 5 o'clock on Fridays and go straight to the sleep in and be at their meetings. And then there were, like, when they had special events on days, I took those days off. I took personal days. They had a lot of weekend activities. So, but it was very difficult. I do not recommend it. I would wake up and like start writing at like 5 a.m. and then, move into my actual real job, or the job that paid. But then when it came to finally like sitting down and writing and being like, okay, now I have to like finish this. I did take a leave from the New York Times, and they welcomed me back.
You have a lot of experience in this area of social services and so forth, but I think a lot of readers, and you address this very well in the book, might be surprised on what types of people are homeless. Giselle is a highly skilled office manager at various dental clinics, and then at the Girl Scouts, she has a full-time job, and yet she was homeless for much of the book.
Yeah. And that was one of the reasons I decided to go ahead and take the beat at the New York Times, because actually my career at the Washington Post, at the Star Ledger in New Jersey, even some at the Courier Journal and for Gannett newspapers, I covered politics, local politics and political corruption. I was an investigative reporter. That's what I did. And I arrived at the New York Times to cover City Hall. And then there were a number of high profile, there's always something high profile nationally, but the national desk asked me to cover some major events. I covered Charleston, unfortunate Emmanuel Church. And then I also covered Freddie Gray's death in Baltimore. And with that, I didn't write the day-to-day story. I wrote a story about the poverty in Freddie Gray's neighborhood. And an editor at the Times noticed that story and was like, have you ever thought about covering social services? And I was like, no. And I had to come to grips with why I had never covered social services. I always, that beat would always come open at different places where I worked. And I was like, no, I don't want it. And I realized it was because I was so close to it. And I didn't like the way people were portrayed. And I had to get over my embarrassment. There was like all these things from my childhood, the, free lunch card and food stamps and, but Troop 6000, the girls actually helped me kind of like relive that. And then I felt like I could write about what they were going through because I went through it. My family never experienced homelessness, never lived in a shelter, but certainly lived check to check. And so when I was asked, would you be interested in covering social services in New York? I knew from, just knowing, I'm like, these stories that I see in the New York Post mostly, of, folks outside with the cardboard sign or on the subway, panhandling. That is not the full story of homelessness in New York City. The full story of homelessness in New York City is someone who looks like me. She's a Black mother or a mother of color, and she has children. I'm like, that's me. And I'm like, I can definitely relate. And I wanted to make sure that people understood that New York City is a very expensive city. A lot of people struggle, but this city is also pretty special. And wouldn't it be a shame if it was only full of rich people? And so because there are so many people who still love the city despite its expense, unfortunately, some people end up experiencing homelessness. And so Giselle was one of those people. You get one medical bill behind, or your car breaks down or gets hit. I mean, if you read the book, like, everyone has these, it's like, death by 1,000 cuts. It's like poverty by 1,000 little fees and incidents. And so that's what happened to Giselle.
Yeah, just filling out the forms at the shelters, keeping in good stead, minding the lines made me feel like, I wanted to do my taxes, because, in contrast, that was like a good Saturday night or something. It's just like reams and reams of paper.
Yes, making sure, just carrying around, like, where is your birth certificate? Do you know where your birth certificate is? Where do you keep it? See, and if you're experiencing homelessness in New York City with a family, you have to have everybody's birth certificate ready right there. You have everybody's social security card. Where's your social security card? Where do you keep it? Now, there are going to be people who are like, I know exactly where my social security card is. Well, that's great. Good for you. But I think if a lot of us are honest, we don't necessarily keep up with all of our paperwork all in one place, all nice and neat, which is what is demanded of you when you are not only experiencing homelessness, but just, hardships, economic hardships. And so, you're like complaining about what it takes to get a mortgage, and like just what it takes to get into a shelter to make sure your family is not on the street. It's like the same requirements. So, yeah.
We got a great question from our audience from Shanna, who asks, what kinds of activities do the girls do in their troop? And how are these experiences similar or different from the typical Girl Scout troops in New York City?
It's pretty much exactly the same as any other troop, except they do get to go on a lot more trips because it is Troop 6000. And so luckily there are groups, that want to help Troop 6000 experience special things. Before the pandemic, I can remember because, now a line has been crossed now that the book is over. I can cross the line. And so there was a troop member who lived very far out in Brooklyn. And so I, got her from there to Midtown, New York, so that she could visit the Samantha Bee show. So, they get to do, things like that you don't always see on TV or in the news. But it also was very important to the Girl Scouts of Greater New York to start making sure that the girls have, the true experience of Girl Scouting. And so each site, they tailor you know, what the girls do. You know, there's a shelter in Brooklyn, for example, that, you know, they were getting like a dance badge. And they're like, does anybody know any black ballerinas? I'm like, oh, I do. And, you know, I was very kind of one of my friends, who is an Alvin Ailey dancer, to go and speak to them. And so, but she didn't go to every shelter, because each shelter now tailors it, like it's almost like a troop inside a troop. So, and they call them sites, not shelters. So it'll be like your Troop 6000, but you're the sleep-in site.
But also just typical Girl Scout thing activities, to Shanna's point, happen throughout the book, like making buildings out of popsicle sticks, or doing a thing about safety, how to call 911, things
Right.
like that.
Yes, they do all of the badge work. I'm like, I have badges right here. You know, they get like coding badge. You know, they go to the cookie rally to get for, you know, getting it, preparing for selling cookies. And that was something too. You know, at the beginning, they didn't know if the girls would be able to sell cookies at all, because, you know, how do you sell cookies in the shelter? Like if people are going door to door, or going in the neighborhood, or, you know, parents are already, you know, they just weren't sure it was going to work, because like normally a parent might, you know, post a sign at work and be like, oh, but then, you know, do you really want to burden someone who's living in shelter, and whose first priority is getting out of the shelter? Do you want to sell cookies? It's like, ugh. But they figured out a way to sell cookies, and they sold a whole lot of cookies. You can read all about it in the book.
I was surprised. I was really convinced that cookie sales are a very educational and nurturing experience for the girls. Because, you know, as an outsider, you see it, you're, oh, that's just, you know, fundraising, but it goes beyond that.
Yes, it does. You know, it really is about, you know, it was amazing to see the girls kind of organize and decide, like, okay, I am really like a saleswoman. I'm going to get all the people to come in, or I really know the money. It's like, you know, and there is a Girl Scout. She is fantastic. She's actually on the cover. She's good at everything, first of all, but she's also a math whiz. And she could see one of her fellow scouts struggling a little bit with, okay, wait, you got 2 boxes of cookies. Let's see. She's like, let me get in here and help you. So to see the girls figure out what they're good at, you know, you do that through not only cookie sales, but through different Girl Scout activities. And, you know, I don't want to say I drank the Kool-Aid and ate the cookie, but, you know, I wasn't a Girl Scout when I was a kid. Frankly, my family, like I said, didn't have a lot of money, and Girl Scouts, that was not a priority. I always admired the uniforms, but I even thought, like, oh my gosh, if I ask my mom, I know we're gonna have to pay for the uniform. They go on trips, we have to pay for the trips. You know, am I gonna ask my mom to help me sell cookies? Like, no. So I'm like, let me just stick to my newspaper writing. But what I love about Girl Scouts is that there's a badge for everything, meaning that there is an activity for every girl. So if she's not interested in one thing, she'll be interested in another.
Well, you answered one of our audience's questions of whether you were a Girl Scout. So that's good. We kick that off the list. Eventually, once you got your sources were comfortable with you, what was that reporting like? Can you give like a day in the life of, it sounded like you had dinner with them, you were on site, getting the kind of great deep texture of their lives, of little decisions that they had to make and discussions.
Yes. You know, like I could see sometimes in real time decisions that were being made where I would be like, might not want to do that, but I couldn't interfere. I just had to watch, be this, fly on the wall. And there were times when people would say, "Oh, Nikita, what do you think I should do?" I'm like, I can't tell you what to do. Like I can't. Now people call me for advice or help, and I'm like, okay, you know what you should do? You know who you need to call? You need to call this person. And so that's a good feeling, and I'm just glad that they trusted me enough that I was able to write this great book that I feel, I always want to make sure that people are comfortable with what I'm writing, even if it's difficult for them to read. And there is a mother in the book who, because when you're writing about real people too, you have to get everybody's permission for everything. Like, talk about this piece of paper for homeless. I'm like, I'm sorry, I have to give you one more piece of paper, but I need you to sign this so that you know exactly what's in the book. And so a lot of people read the passages about them. And there's a mother, she called me. I was like, oh my gosh, is she going to be like, oh my God, I hate this, or, oh, you got this wrong. And she was like, oh my God. She's like, it was so difficult to read. She's like, but I love that, like, you wrote my story. And like, for me, that was the best compliment. That's all I needed. And like I said, they were absolutely under no obligation to participate. And there were some parents who did not want to be in the book. So they are not. But the ones who trusted me with their story, they write about it on social media when the book came out, and they were like really excited. And so that gives me a lot of joy, because I've talked to folks and they're like, we needed to let people know, because there are so many people who are experiencing the same thing, but no one talks about it. But here it's wrapped in the Girl Scouts. And so it's almost like, I jokingly told my editor at Random House, it's like, maybe the subtitle should be "Come for the Cookies, Stay for Real Life." She's like, oh, that's funny, but no, that's not the title.
What are you writing about now? What kind of new issues are sparking your curiosity? Or
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I sent my bio in a while ago, and I've been 2 weeks on the job as an editor, which is a very new experience for me. Thank you. But I did have one very big project laying around, and you'll read it next week. But I didn't spend like every day of 6 months with people, but I write about 6 months of hunger. And a photographer, Todd Heisler, and I, we followed 4 families who are among the thousands and thousands and thousands now of people who are going to pantries. And I wanted to get beyond the line, and see what people were actually doing at home. And what I found is that, it was a hardship getting the food, and standing in line is grueling and emotionally taxing. But once people like get their bags, there's like so much relief. And then when they get home and cook, there's just like so much love and joy and pride in making these dishes. And so that's what you'll read.
That's awesome. Well, Nikita Stewart, thank you so much for being with us today. And it's such a treat to hear first first person how this book came together, and continued success with the book. And I can't wait to read the pantry story in the Times. As I noted earlier, as we sign off today, you'll see a link to buy Troop 6000, and then also a link to help us continue our mission here in Vermont with the Vermont Literary with the Brattleboro Literary Festival. And I want to thank everyone for coming. Have a great day.
Thank you.
See ya. Thanks a lot.